Hello everyone, I'm Saumya Kushwaha, a member of Software Development Group at COPS IITBHU. In this tutorial, I will show you how to work with HTML forms in Django. As part of this demonstration, I will extend the local library website so that librarians can renew the book using our own forms rather than using the admin application. An HTML form is a group of one or more fields on a web page, which can be used to collect information from users for submission to a server. Forms are flexible mechanism for collecting user input because there are suitable widgets for entering many different types of data, including text boxes, checkboxes, radio buttons, date pickers, and so on. First, let me tell you the process of how Django handles form requests. Starting with a request for a page containing a form, there are mainly 6 steps. Display the default form the first time it is requested by the user, then receive data from a submit request and bind it to the form. Third, clean and validate the data. Fourth, if any data is invalid, redisplay the form. This time with any user populated values and error messages for the problem fields. Fifth, if all the data is valid, perform required action. For example, save the data, send an email, return the result of a search or upload a file, etc. Sixth, once all the actions are complete, redirect the user to another page. Now, let's start with declaring the form. The declaration syntax for a form is very similar to that for declaring a model and shares the same field types and some similar parameters. Form data is stored in an application's forms.py file inside the application directory. So let's create a new file in local library/catalog named as forms.py. Here is our code for forms.py. These are some libraries we are using and also Django forms to create a form. After that, we import the forms library derived from the form class and declare the form fields. Then we are accepting the input in renewal_date. Here already displayed value is after 3 weeks from the borrowed date. There are two important things to note. The first thing that we get our data using self.clean_data renewal date, and that we return this data whether or not we change it at the end of the function. This step gets us the data cleaned and sanitized of potentially unsafe input using the default validators and converted into the correct standard type for the data. In this case, a Python datetime.datetime object. The second point is that if the value falls outside our range, we raise a validation error, specifying the error text that we want to display in the form if an invalid value is entered. That's all we need for a form in this example. Now, before we update our views.py, let's add a URL configuration for the renew books page. So to the bottom of the local library/catalog/urls.py, add the following URL pattern. This URL pattern configuration will redirect URLs with the format /catalog/book/bookcopy_id/renew to the function named renew book librarian in views.py and send the book copy ID as a parameter named pk. The pattern will only matches if pk is correctly formatted int. So for this, let's create renew book librarian function in the views.py. Let me add the required libraries first in this file. Then at the bottom of the file, we will add our function renew book librarian. Now, as discussed in the Django form handling process earlier, the view has to render the default form when it is first called, and then either re-render it with error messages if the data is invalid, or process the data and redirect to a new page if data is valid. In order to perform these different actions, the view has to be able to know whether it is being called for the first time to render the default form or a subsequent time to validate data. The book renewal process will be written to our database. So by convention, we use the post request approach. First, we import our form, renew book form, and a number of other useful object methods used in the body for view function. In the view, we first use the pk argument in the get object or 404 function to get the current book copy. If this does not exist, the view will immediately exit and page will display a not found error. If this is not a post request, then we create the default form passing in an initial value for a renewal date field 3 weeks from the current date. After creating the form, we will render to create the HTML page specifying the template and context that contains our form. In this case, the context also contains our book instance, which we will use in the template to provide information about the book we are renewing. However, if this is a post request, then we create our form object and populate it with the data from the request. This process is called binding and allows us to validate the form. Then we check if the form is valid, which runs all the validation code on all of the fields, including both the generic code to check that our date field is actually a valid date, and our specific form's clean renewal date function to check the date is in the right range. If this form is not valid, then we call the render again, but this time the form value passed in the context will include the error message. If the form is valid, then we start to use the data, accessing it through the form.cleanData attribute. Here we just save the data into the due-back value of the associated book instance object. The final step in the form handling part of the view is to redirect to the another page, usually a success page. In this case, we use HTTP response redirect and reverse to redirect to the view named books. Now, before creating our template of the form, let's first add due_back in models.py because we will be using this in our template, and also correct some date time related errors so that we will not get any problem during our testing. Also, don't forget to do the migrations after these changes in models.py. Now create the template referenced in catalog/template/catalog with a file name bookrenewlibrarian.html. In this file, we will add our form template. Here we extend the base template and then reference the content block. Here we are able to reference book instance and its variable because it was passed into the context object in the render function, and we use this to list the book title, borrower, and the original due date. Now the form code is relatively simple. First, we declare the form text specifying whether the form is to be submitted and the method for submitting the data. In this case, an HTTP post. If you recall the HTML forms overview in the starting, an empty action means that the form data will be posted back to the current URL of the page. which is what we want. Inside the tags, we define the submit input, which a user can press to submit the data. The CSRF token added just inside the form tags is the part of Django's cross-site forgery protection. To clearly see the changes in the front end, let's add the copy.dewback in our book detail. Now we are all set to do the testing part of our form and it's working. So let's come to testing part. Let's go to our all book section and choose a book. I have already made a copy of it with the due date March 20, 2022 from our admins. Let's change it using our form. Now it's already showing the renewal date after 3 weeks from our borrow date. Now change it to 5 and submit. We are back to our books page and here it's updated. So that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. Thank you.